The night I found out wasn't loud. It didn't start with a scream, a fight, or a storm. It started with silence. A kind of silence that doesn't belong to ordinary nights, the kind that wraps itself around your ribs and makes it hard to breathe. I remember the glow of my phone screen in the dark, the clock reading 10:47 p.m. She told me she was working late. Big pitch in the morning, she said. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We've been married 9 years. Trust wasn't something I questioned. It was something I lived in. But then the notification popped up. A friend. A message. Just 4 words. You need to see this. There was a photo attached. Blurry. But not blurry enough. Her. Standing under the golden archway of the Sapphire Hotel. A 5-star downtown. A place she once said was too expensive for people like us. She wasn't alone. Beside her was a man in a black suit, his hand resting on the small of her back like he belonged there. I stared at the image for a long time. My fingers hovered over the screen, but they didn't shake. Not yet. Trust doesn't shatter all at once. It fractures quietly. I could have called her. I could have driven straight there and confronted her in the lobby. But something inside me, something colder, quieter, told me to wait. To watch. I grabbed my keys, slipped on a jacket, and drove. The roads were empty, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. It had rained earlier, the kind of thin drizzle that left the world looking like it was covered in glass. When I pulled up to the Sapphire, I saw the valet helping a couple out car. My heart clenched when I saw her. My wife, laughing. That soft, practiced laugh I used to think was mine. Her hair was pinned back elegantly. She wore the black dress she'd told me she forgot she even had. The man beside her leaned close as they walked through the revolving doors. I didn't follow them in right away. I sat in the car for a full minute, letting the truth settle in. It didn't come like a punch. It came like a slow, steady ache. Then I got out, straightened my jacket, and walked through the doors. The lobby was warm, the kind of warmth money can buy. Golden chandeliers, marble floors, the smell of expensive perfume floating in the air. I walked up to the front desk like a man who belonged there. Good evening, the receptionist said, smiling politely. Reservation for Cole Bennett, I said. It wasn't a lie. I didn't have one, but I'd made more than enough money in the last few years to improvise. She typed, frowned gently. I don't see a reservation under that name. No problem, I said, pulling out my card. Let's make one. Within minutes, I had a room key in my hand. Floor 11, corner suite, close to the elevators. I didn't rush upstairs. I walked slowly, like a man observing a chessboard. Because that's what this was now, a game. When the elevator doors opened, a couple stepped out laughing. I stayed behind them, waited for the next one, and pressed level 12. She always loved top floors. She used to say, the higher up you are, the less the world touches you. As the elevator hummed upward, I replayed every conversation from the past month. The late nights, the quick showers, the faint traces of perfume she said were from work. I had missed the signs. Or maybe I'd chosen not to see them. The elevator dinged softly. I stepped out. The hallway smelled like roses and money. Soft lighting, cream-colored walls, muted carpet. My footsteps barely made sound. And then I saw her, at the far end of the hall, laughing again. She fumbled with the key card while he leaned in, whispering something that made her tilt her head back in amusement. That sound used to belong to me. They disappeared into room 1209. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the closed door. 9 years of marriage, dozens of road trips, plans for a future, quiet dinners where she used to look at me like I was her world. All of it behind that door now. I could have knocked. I could have made a scene. But I didn't. I turned around, walked back to the elevator, and went down to my room. Floor 11, room 1104. When I closed the door behind me, the silence wrapped around me again. Except this time, it wasn't empty. It was sharp, clean, like the edge of something dangerous. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the key card in my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even text her, because something inside me had shifted. This wasn't the night she betrayed me. That had happened weeks ago, maybe months. This was the night I stopped pretending it wasn't happening. At 12:16 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Laughter again, louder this time. They were heading out, maybe to the bar, maybe to the rooftop. I walked to the door and opened it just a crack. There she was, arm around him, his hand on her waist. Not like a stranger, like a man who believed he owned that moment. And then, something I hadn't planned, something instinctive. I stepped out of my room just as they passed by. Her laughter died instantly when she saw me. Her entire body froze. "Cole," she whispered. I tilted my head slightly, meeting her eyes. "Hey, sweetheart." The man beside her looked confused. She stepped away from him like the distance could erase what I'd already seen. "What are you doing here?" she breathed. "Checking in," I said simply. Figured I'd see what all the fuss was about. The air between us grew heavy, the kind of heavy that wraps itself around your throat. She blinked rapidly. "Cole, this isn't—" "Don't," I interrupted softly. "Please, don't insult both of us with lies." The man finally spoke. "Who is this?" She turned to him, pale as ash. "My husband." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was devastating. His eyebrows shot up. "You're married?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I stepped forward calm. Not yelling, not shaking, just calm. "Enjoy your evening." Then I walked past them, down the hall, into the elevator. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't the one walking away. I was. The elevator doors closed behind me, but her face stayed burned into my mind. Not the woman I fell in love with. Not the one I built a life with. Just a stranger who flinched like a guilty child caught in the dark. My hands were still steady. It surprised me. I'd imagined this kind of betrayal before. In those sleepless nights when something didn't feel right, when the distance between us grew too quiet to ignore. I thought I'd break if it was ever real. But I didn't break. I hardened. When I stepped out onto the ground floor, the hotel lobby looked exactly the same as when I'd walked in earlier. Warm lights, polished marble, the smell of perfume and money. But everything felt different. I wasn't just a man in a hotel. I was a husband who'd crossed an invisible line, the moment between suspecting and knowing. I walked to the bar near the lobby. A piano was playing something soft, almost too beautiful for a night like this. Couples sat close together, sipping drinks, laughing about nothing. I ordered a bourbon. "Neat." The bartender poured it quietly. "Rough night?" he asked. I gave him a half smile. "Something like that." He nodded, like he'd heard 1,000 versions of that answer before, and moved on. I sat there for a long time, letting the burn of the drink settle somewhere beneath my ribs. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't check if she was calling. I didn't need to. People think betrayal hits like a knife. It doesn't. It seeps in, slow. It slides beneath your skin, whispering everything you thought was real isn't. But here's the part no one talks about. Once you see it, once you really see it, there's no going back to pretending. I thought about how it all started. Her name's Lily. We met at a small art exhibit 9 years ago. I was broke back then, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. She was radiant, magnetic. She said she fell in love with how hard I dreamed. We used to walk through this same city with empty pockets, but full hearts. I believed in us so much I would have walked through fire if she asked. Now, she was upstairs in a hotel with someone else. And it wasn't just about cheating. It was about how easily she'd thrown away everything we built. At 12:48 a.m., my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. I let it ring, then another, and another. By the 4th call, I picked up, not because I wanted to hear excuses, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go to lie. "Cole," she breathed. Her voice was low, shaky. "Where are you?" I stared at the bar counter, tracing the rim of my glass with my thumb. "Downstairs." Silence. "You saw me?" "I saw enough." "Cole, please," she started, her voice quivering. "This isn't what it looks like." I actually laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just tired. "You're really going to say that?" She went quiet. Then soft, "Can we talk?" "Please, just talk." "Fine," I said. "Come downstairs." 5 minutes later, I saw her step out of the elevator. The woman who walked toward me didn't look like the woman I married. Same face, different soul. She walked carefully, like the floor might crack beneath her. Her dress shimmered under the light, but the confidence that used to live in her spine was gone. "Cole," she whispered as she reached the bar. "Sit." She sat. For a long moment, we didn't speak. Just the sound of the piano and the soft clinking of glasses filled the air. "Who is he?" I asked finally. My voice wasn't raised, just steady. She swallowed. "Someone from work." "How long?" Her eyes dropped. That was my answer. I leaned back. "So it wasn't a one-time mistake." "No," she said quietly. "It's been a few months." "A few months." I nodded slowly, taking that in like a punch to the chest. I refused to let it knock me down. "Why?" I asked. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know, Cole. I don't know what happened to us. You've been so distant lately. You're always working. You're barely here." I almost laughed again. "So you cheated because I work?" "It's not like that," she pleaded. "It wasn't planned. It just—" I raised my hand slightly. "Lily, stop. Please. Don't do that thing where you try to make betrayal sound poetic." She flinched. She stared at her hands like they held all the answers. "He listened. He made me feel like I mattered again. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I can't undo it now." There it was. Not a single apology. Just the sound of someone admitting the truth only because they'd been caught. "You could have talked to me," I said. "You could have yelled at me, fought me, told me you were unhappy. Instead, you chose this." Tears rolled down her cheeks now. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. And then it just got too far. "Funny," I said softly. "You didn't want to lose me, but you lost me the second you walked into that hotel with him." She reached across the counter, her hand brushing mine. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. "Cole," she whispered, "I love you." "No," I said. "You love me. There's a difference." Her lip trembled. "I'm begging you. Don't throw this away." I looked at her, really looked at her. Not the woman I built my life with. The woman who made a choice. "I didn't throw anything away," I said quietly. "You did." She broke down then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, raw sobs that would have shattered me once. But now, it didn't reach me. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and stood up. "Cole, please," she whispered, grabbing my wrist. "Don't walk away." I gently pulled my hand free. "You walked away first, Lily. You just didn't realize it." And then I left her sitting there at the bar, crying into the kind of night she created. As I rode the elevator back up to my room, I felt something strange. Not relief, not rage, clarity. There's a moment in every storm when you realize you're not drowning anymore. You're just standing in the rain. That was me, and the rain had never felt so honest. When I reached my room again, the silence wrapped around me like an old coat. This time, it didn't sting. It just felt cold and honest. Everything in my life up until a few hours ago had been built on a lie I didn't know existed. Now I could see the cracks everywhere. In a late-night work excuses, in the faint smell of unfamiliar cologne that she called a colleague's hug, in the way she'd been kissing me lately, like a woman saying goodbye without having the courage to admit it. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hands over my face. It wasn't the betrayal itself that hurt the most. It was how ordinary it had been. She didn't cheat on me out of some grand tragedy or dramatic love story. She did it the way people misplace things, casually, quietly, without a second thought. For years, I had been her safe place, her anchor, but someone else made her feel new again. And that was enough for her to forget everything we'd built. I took out my phone, stared at our wedding photo as the screen lit up. Her smile, my hand on her waist. Two people who really believed they'd beaten the odds. I believed in that photo like it was proof that love could withstand everything. But love doesn't die with thunder. It dies with whispers. And tonight, those whispers were echoing through a hotel hallway. At 1:37 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Her name. I ignored it. Then a knock on the door. Not hesitant, desperate. I let it knock 4 times before I opened it. She was standing there, mascara smeared, eyes red, hands trembling like she'd been running in the rain. She wasn't the polished woman who walked into this hotel tonight. She was stripped of all the lies she'd been hiding behind. "Cole," she whispered, "please let me in." I stepped aside silently. She walked in slowly, as if she didn't belong there anymore. And she didn't. Not in the way she once had. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She stood in the middle of the room, twisting her fingers the way she used to when she was nervous about exams in college. Back then, I'd hold her hands and tell her everything would be fine. I wasn't doing that tonight. "I'm sorry," she finally said. The words were quiet, like a secret she didn't want to share. I leaned against the wall, arms folded. Are you sorry you did it? Or sorry you got caught? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I'm sorry I hurt you. I never wanted this to happen. I almost laughed. Then why did it happen, Lily? You don't accidentally end up in a hotel with someone else. That takes planning. That takes lying. That takes choices. Tears spilled down her cheeks again. I didn't plan to fall out of love with you. And yet you did. She stepped closer. Cole, I swear I still love you. I shook my head slowly. No, you love the version of me that didn't know. The man who trusted you blindly. That's who you loved. But you don't get to stand here in this room and pretend nothing broke tonight. She covered her mouth with her hands, her shoulders shaking. I was lonely, she whispered. You're always working, you're so distant. I felt like I was living with a ghost. I stared at her for a long moment. And sleeping with someone else made that better? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between us screamed the truth. She felt her knees in front of me, grabbing my hands the way she used to when she begged me to stay during our early fights. Please don't leave me, she whispered. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I'll end it with him. I swear I already have. Her words might have worked on the man I was yesterday. But that man died the moment I saw her laughing with another man under the golden lights of the Sapphire Hotel. Lily, I said softly, it didn't break my heart tonight. You killed something bigger than that. Her eyes searched mine, desperate. What? My trust. She broke then. Not a stage sob, not a soft cry. She fell apart in a way I'd never seen. But the cruel thing about betrayal is this: the tears come too late. They can't glue anything back together. They can only soak the floor beneath the pieces. I knelt down slowly, so we were eye level. Do you know what's worse than being cheated on? She shook her head weakly. Realizing the person you built your entire world around could burn it down so easily. She grabbed my face in her hands, the same hands that once felt like home. I made a mistake. I'm begging you, please don't throw us away. I gently pulled her hands down. You threw us away the night you let someone else touch what was never theirs. She sobbed harder, shaking. Cole, please. I'll do anything. And here's the thing. Once upon a time, those words would have made me crumble. I would have forgiven her because I loved her more than I loved myself. But I wasn't that man anymore. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the city lights. They looked exactly the same as they had hours ago. But I wasn't the same man looking at them. I'm not going to fight with you, Lily, I said quietly. I'm not going to scream or break things. I'm just done pretending this marriage is still what it used to be. Behind me, I heard her breath hitch. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done. She stood slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. You're not serious. Cole, we've been together 9 years. Yeah, I said, still looking out the window. 9 years of building something I thought was unshakable. Turns out, it only took one night for you to prove me wrong. You can't just walk away, she whispered. I turned to face her. You walked away first. I'm just catching up. The clock ticked softly on a nightstand, the only sound between us. She stared at me with wide, broken eyes. The same eyes I once loved. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. You already did. I opened the door. She stood there, frozen, unable to move. She probably expected me to yell, to argue, to beg for explanations. But I gave her none of that. Because when someone shows you who they are, you stop listening to their words. You start believing their actions. Good night, Lily, I said softly. And then I closed the door. For the first time in 9 years, I slept without reaching for her. The morning after didn't feel like the aftermath of a war. It felt like stepping outside after a storm. Everything quieter, sharper, stripped bare. The city was waking up just like any other day, cars rolling by, coffee carts steaming, people hurrying to work. The world didn't care that my marriage had just cracked in half. And that was the first real sign I'd already crossed the bridge. When your world falls apart and the sun still rises, you realize the pain isn't forever. I packed slowly, not because I was unsure, but because everything suddenly felt final. My toothbrush, my watch, the shirt I'd taken off last night before sitting in silence. Every little object had a weight. Not of love anymore, but of memory. I left the key card on the nightstand and walked out without looking back. She was still in the hotel lobby. I saw her before she saw me, sitting on one of those velvet chairs near the entrance, staring at the floor like the marble had the answers she couldn't find. Her hair was messy, makeup gone, eyes swollen. For 9 years, I'd only ever known her as composed, deliberate, radiant. But today, she looked like someone who had watched her life slip through her fingers overnight. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes widened a little. "Cole," she whispered. I kept walking. "Please," she said, standing up. I stopped a few feet from her. "Not too close. Not anymore." She reached for my arm instinctively, but caught herself halfway. Even she could feel the distance now, not just physical, but something much bigger. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I met her gaze, steady. "We already did." "That wasn't, Cole, I was a mess. I need to explain." "You don't owe me explanations," I said evenly. "You owed me honesty, and you used it on someone else." Her lips trembled. "I made a mistake. A stupid, selfish mistake. But I love you. I've always loved you." I gave a small, humorless smile. "Loving someone and respecting them are not the same thing, Lily. And you showed me exactly which one mattered less to you." We stood there, the lobby bustling around us, as if the world was deliberately reminding her she wasn't the center of it. People walked past us, dragging suitcases, laughing over early flights, sipping coffee. And there we were, two people who had shared everything, now reduced to strangers having their last conversation. "Cole, please," she said, tears filling her eyes again. "I'll leave him. I already have. It didn't mean anything." I shook my head slowly. "That's the part you don't get. It didn't have to mean anything to destroy everything." She flinched because deep down, she knew it was true. I walked past her toward the exit, but she followed. "Cole," she called again, her voice cracking. "Please don't walk away from us." I turned just outside the revolving door. The air outside was crisp, cold, honest. "You walked away months ago," I said. "Last night was just when I finally caught up to the truth." She pressed her hands against her mouth to keep herself from crying out loud. I didn't stay to watch her break again. I pushed through the door and stepped outside, where the air didn't taste like lies. For the next few weeks, I moved like a man shedding skin. I moved out of the house. I stayed at a friend's place at first, then rented a small apartment. It wasn't about running away. It was about reclaiming air that didn't smell like her perfume or feel like betrayal under the wallpaper. She called every night for the first 10 days. I didn't pick up. Then it became texts. Long, rambling ones. Then short, desperate ones. Then silence. I didn't block her. I just let the silence answer what words couldn't. People around me started noticing the shift. My best friend Ryan asked me one night over beers, "Man, how are you not losing it right now?" I shrugged. "I think I already lost it a long time ago. I just didn't know it." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I was saying. "You're not going to take her back, are you?" "No, not even if she begs." "She already did," I said quietly, and it didn't feel like love. It felt like a woman trying to save the comfort she built around me. And I'm done being her comfort zone. Divorce papers came next. Cold, neat, impersonal. She tried to stall it. I didn't. There were no shouting matches. No broken furniture. No fiery revenge. Just ink on paper and the quiet death of a marriage. But somewhere in that silence, something new was being born me. Not the man who spent years making sure she was happy. Not the man who carried the weight of her moods, her silences, her small betrayals she called white lies. A man who could finally breathe. 3 months later, I saw her again. Not by plan, by accident. I was sitting at a coffee shop near my new office, reading some documents. She walked in, wearing a gray coat, hair tied up, eyes scanning the room for a place to sit. When her gaze landed on me, she froze. For a heartbeat, it felt like the universe had looped back. Same woman, same city, different man. She walked over slowly, as if asking permission with every step. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi. You look good," she whispered. I nodded. "I feel good." She sat down across from me without asking. She didn't look like the woman from that hotel anymore. Not glamorous, not untouchable, just human. "I miss you," she said after a long silence. I took a sip of my coffee. I don't miss who we were at the end. Her breath caught. You broke something that can't be glued back together, I said calmly. Not because I can't forgive, but because even forgiveness can't make me forget what I saw. Tears pooled in her eyes, but I didn't feel that old ache anymore. I just felt distance. I lost everything the moment you walked away, she whispered. No, I corrected gently. You lost everything the moment you decided I wasn't enough. The silence between us said more than her tears ever could. I hope, I added, standing up, you find the version of yourself who doesn't destroy the people who love her. I walked out of that coffee shop without looking back. As I stepped into the cool air, I realized something that made my chest feel light. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need apologies or explanations. The night at the hotel wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of a version of me she'd never get to know. And that was enough. The divorce finalized quietly. No courtroom theatrics, no shouting, no cinematic tears. Just a clerk stamping the documents and handing me the papers that said, in a few neat paragraphs, it's over. It's strange how the ending of a marriage isn't loud. You'd expect a crack, a final bang, some kind of closure that feels like an ending. But real endings are quiet. They don't come with fireworks. They come with signatures. I walked out of that courthouse in a sunlight that felt like freedom. For the first time in 9 years, I didn't feel tied to her shadow. I thought that would be the end of it. But life rarely lets things end cleanly. 2 weeks after the divorce, I got a call from an unknown number. I ignored it at first, but it rang again. When I finally answered, a man's voice came through, deep, slightly anxious. Is this Cole Bennett? Yes. This is Thomas Hale. We met briefly at the hotel that night. I froze. It was him, the man from the hallway. I didn't speak. He continued, I know this is awkward, but I need to tell you something. My jaw tightened. You've got 10 seconds. He exhaled. I didn't know she was married. I swear I didn't. She told me you two were separated. I closed my eyes, steadying my voice. You didn't need to call me to say that. She lied to me too, Cole, he said quickly. And I'm not saying this for forgiveness. I just thought you should know. I ended it. The day after. I couldn't keep being part of something that felt rotten. For a moment, I said nothing. There was no satisfaction, no anger. Just exhaustion. Good for you, I said finally, and hung up. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a drink in hand, thinking about that call. It didn't change anything. It didn't make her actions softer or more forgivable. But it reminded me of something important. Betrayal doesn't just destroy marriages. It leaves wreckage in every direction. I wasn't her only casualty. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the one who escaped. Months passed. I focused on rebuilding. Work became my therapy. I poured myself into my projects. Long hours, new ideas, new partnerships. People started noticing the difference. You seem lighter, my colleague Sarah said one afternoon. I am, I admitted. She smiled knowingly. Sometimes losing the wrong person is what sets you free. She didn't know how right she was. Sarah and I grew closer after that. Not in a rushed, rebound kind of way. Slowly, honestly, the kind of closeness that builds from shared respect rather than loneliness. She was the opposite of Lily. Where Lily was chaos wrapped in charm, Sarah was calm wrapped in warmth. She didn't need grand gestures. She just showed up consistently without fanfare. One evening, after a late meeting, we were walking to our cars when she asked quietly, "Do you ever miss her?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "No," I said finally. "I miss the man I used to be when I thought she loved me. But not her." Sarah nodded gently, understanding without prying. That was the moment I realized how healing felt. Not dramatic, not loud, just gentle. Meanwhile, life seemed to be catching up with Lily. Word spread that she'd left her job. A mutual friend mentioned her name once, said she'd moved out of the city, trying to start over. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. Karma doesn't always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in the form of a woman packing her own boxes, realizing too late that the grass she ran toward was just painted green. About 6 months later, I ran into her again. It was completely by chance. I was grabbing lunch downtown with a client when I saw her through the cafe window across the street. She was sitting alone, wearing a faded denim jacket, sipping coffee that had clearly gone cold. Our eyes met for the briefest second. She froze. I didn't. I just nodded once, not out of bitterness, but out of closure. And maybe for the first time, she saw it in my eyes, the calm of a man who'd moved on. That night, I drove back home and found Sarah waiting for me with 2 cups of takeout coffee. She smiled, holding one out. Rough day. I took the cup, laughing softly. Just a reminder of how far I've come. She raised an eyebrow. An ex-reminder? I nodded. Her voice softened. Do you ever think about what you'd say to her now, if you could? I stared out at the skyline, the city glowing like a promise. Yeah, I said finally. I'd thank her. Sarah tilted her head, surprised. Thank her for leaving, I said. If she hadn't, I'd still be trapped in a life built on pretending. She gave me freedom without even realizing it. Sarah smiled faintly, and I saw something in her eyes. Not pity, not judgment, just admiration. That's the healthiest thing I've ever heard anyone say about their ex. Maybe it's not health, I said with a shrug. Maybe it's just peace. We sat on the couch that night. No heavy conversations, no ghost between us. Just 2 people who knew what it meant to lose and still choose to love again. The next morning, I woke up early. Sunlight was spilling across the room, painting the walls in gold. I walked to the mirror and barely recognized the man looking back. He wasn't broken anymore. He wasn't waiting for apologies that would never come. He was free. I got a letter in the mail later that week. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. I knew it was hers before I opened it. Inside, just a single page. Cole, I know I have no right to write this. I've tried 100 times to say it out loud, but I can't. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away because I was too blind to see it. I hope you're happy now, truly happy. You deserve that. I'm sorry. Lily. I read it once, then folded it back neatly and put in a drawer I rarely opened. Not because I wanted to hold on to the past, but because some things deserve to be acknowledged, even if they no longer have power. I didn't need to write back. My life was already the answer. The seasons shifted before I even realized how far I'd walked from that night at the hotel. It was early spring now, the kind of crisp morning where the world smells like new beginnings. The pain that used to cling to me like a second skin was fading into something quieter. Not gone entirely, but distant, like background noise you stop noticing. I wasn't counting the days since the divorce anymore. I wasn't checking her social media. I wasn't rehearsing the what-ifs in my head. She had become a chapter, a long, painful chapter, but not the book. Sarah and I grew closer in ways that didn't feel forced. It wasn't about filling an empty space. It was about creating something new, something solid. She never tiptoed around my past, and she never made me forget it either. She just held space for who I was now. One night, after a long day, we sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker below us. She leaned her head on my shoulder, warm and steady. You ever think about what your life would be like if none of that happened? She asked. I thought about it. Not in the bitter way I used to. Just honestly. Yeah, I think I'd still be married to a woman who didn't really see me anymore. I'd still be pretending everything was fine, and I'd still be drowning quietly. Sarah didn't say anything for a moment. Then she squeezed my hand. Then maybe losing her was the best thing that ever happened to you. I exhaled slowly, letting the truth settle in. Yeah, maybe it was. There's something no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt, it strips you down to the rawest version of yourself. It burns everything superficial away. And once the smoke clears, what's left is either ashes or foundation. I was lucky. I'd found a foundation. A few weeks later, a mutual friend invited me to a charity event downtown. I wasn't planning to go. Crowds still felt strange after everything. But Sarah wanted to, so I agreed. The venue was elegant, chandeliers, polished floors, everyone dressed like they had their lives figured out. It was the kind of place Lily used to love. For a moment, that memory stung. Not because I missed her, but because I once believed that world was ours. Sarah noticed my quiet pause and gently laced her fingers through mine. No questions, just presence. Halfway through the night, I saw her. Lily. She was standing near the far corner, a glass of wine in her hand, wearing a cream dress that tried too hard to be elegant. Her posture was different now. Not confident, not radiant, just fragile. The way someone stands when they've learned the world isn't as forgiving as they thought. She saw me too, and in that single glance, everything between us came rushing back. Not the love, not the pain, just the weight of shared history. She didn't come over right away. I could see the hesitation in her movements. But eventually, she walked across the room, slow and unsure. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I replied. Her eyes flicked briefly to Sarah, then back to me. There was no bitterness in her expression, just quiet acknowledgement of the life she no longer belonged to. "You look good," she said. "I am good," I answered. For a second, something behind her eyes broke a little. But she nodded, forcing a small smile. "I'm glad." She wasn't wearing a wedding ring anymore. Neither was I. But the difference was, I wasn't looking for anything to replace the one I took off. She, on the other hand, carried that emptiness on her face like it was part of her. We talked for a few minutes. Polite, civil. Nothing like the way we used to talk when we shared everything. She told me she'd moved to a smaller place, started taking night classes, was trying to find herself. I didn't say much. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't have to fill the silence anymore. Before she walked away, she said something that stuck with me. "You look like someone who found peace." I held her gaze. "I did." She nodded, blinking fast to hold back the tears she didn't want to show. "I hope I can find that too." I didn't say, "I hope so too." I didn't say anything. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who broke you is let them walk away without trying to make it easier. After she left, Sarah looked at me quietly. She didn't ask who Lily was. She didn't need to. She knew. I took a deep breath, feeling something loosen in my chest. That was the first time I saw her and didn't feel anything. Sarah smiled gently. That's what healing looks like. The rest of the night passed easily. No ghosts in the room. No weight on my chest. Just life moving forward. And I realized something else that night. Closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It comes the moment you stop needing anything from them. A few days later, I stood in front of the mirror again. The man staring back at me didn't have the same eyes as the one who walked into that hotel months ago. That man was shattered. This one was whole. Not because someone fixed him, but because he picked up the pieces himself. No matter how painful that night had been, I wouldn't rewrite it. That moment of betrayal had carved out everything false in my life and left behind only what was real. And what was real was me. I grabbed my jacket, stepped out onto the street, and let the spring breeze hit my face. Somewhere behind me was the man who once begged for explanations. Somewhere behind me was the marriage built on trust she had burned. But ahead of me, there was something better, something new. I smiled. The night I finally understood what freedom felt like wasn't loud. There was no big speech, no dramatic confrontation, no sweeping music in the background. It was quiet. Just me, the city lights, and a calm that I hadn't felt in years. I was walking home with Sarah after a late dinner. The streets were washed in a soft glow from the street lamps. A breeze moved through the trees, cool against my face. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking with a weight on my shoulders. I was just walking. She slipped her hand into mine as naturally as breathing. It wasn't like the early days with Lily, where everything felt like I was trying to prove I was good enough to be loved. This was different, easy, real. I glanced at her, and she smiled at me like she saw me. Not the man trying to fix a broken marriage, not the man hiding pain behind steady eyes, but the man who survived, rebuilt, and became someone stronger. And in that small, quiet moment, I realized something. The night I saw Lily at that hotel wasn't the end of my life. It was the night my old life ended so a better one could begin. When I got home, I stood on my balcony again, the same one where I'd sat months ago trying to make sense of the wreckage. The city stretched out before me, alive and humming. I thought about her one last time. Not the betrayal, not the pain, just the fact that once we shared a story. And now, that story belonged to the past, exactly where it should. No hate, no regret, just acceptance. I whispered into the night, "Thank you for leaving." Because if she hadn't, I would have never found the strength to become this man. People think revenge is about proving the other person wrong. But real revenge isn't loud or messy. It's living a life so full, so honest, so peaceful that the person who broke you can't recognize the version of you they once had power over. Lily will probably think about that night for a long time. But for me, it's just a turning point. I stepped back inside, where Sarah's laughter filled the air like light. And it hit me, love doesn't always look like what you planned. Sometimes it finds you when you've finally learned how to love yourself first. This was my story now, and she wasn't in the ending.